Now that you've seen and learned about the causes of the French Revolution, we're going to move on to the stages of the French Revolution. Like any good movie, there are different stages, different scenes. The French Revolution was the same way. There are many different mini plays that play out during the French Revolution, mini scenes. Now, the first one is when the revolution starts to begin. Now, King Louis XVI realizes that things in France are not going well. And so he decides he's going to call upon the Estates General. Now, the Estates General is all the representatives from all over France. Very similar to our Congress. These representatives come in and they supposedly help the king make decisions. The king is hoping that by calling together the States General, which has not been done in over 100 years, that he's hoping this will shut up all of the whiners and the complainers that have been writing to him and writing in newspapers telling people the king is not doing a good job. He hopes that if he calls all these people together, lets them basically talk about it in a group, they'll all shut up and go home and he can continue on being king. He really doesn't think this is going to, solve any major problems. What he doesn't expect is for the people to actually work together, which is what happens. When the representatives meet in the Palace of Versailles for this Estates General meeting, they start to talk, they start to communicate with each other, they start to share ideas, share grievances or problems, and they realize we have a lot in common here, especially the Third Estate, and they realize it's not just a problem in Paris, it's not just a problem in the other big cities in France, but everyone's suffering all over the place. So they decide that now is the time to act. We need to work together, work basically to make Louis XVI listen to them, make Louis XVI go with their ideas, and hopefully bring about some change. Now, remember, this is the last thing Louis XVI wants. He doesn't want them working together. So when the Estates General meets, they decide the Third Estate section of the Estates General is going to call themselves the National Assembly. And they vow immediately to write a new constitution, which is exactly what they know that new country called the United States of America did when they kicked out Britain. They wrote a new constitution. So the people of France, this Third Estate, is hoping this will help solve their problems. Now, while members of the Third Estate are working with this new National Assembly, trying to change the government in Paris, trying to change the king, you have the working class people, the poor of Paris, the poor of France, that are just suffering. And they believe no one's hearing their cries. They believe no one cares that they are suffering, that they are starving. So they start to riot over the price of bread. They start attacking different bakeries. They start to go after anyone who they see with food because they are so desperate for food. Bakeries actually hid when they had bread in. They would bake their bread in the middle of the night so people wouldn't see the smoke coming out of their wood ovens, hoping that they would be able to sell the bread instead of having riots come in and smash their windows and steal the bread. So things were very, very desperate, especially in the bigger cities of France. There is a huge prison in the center of Paris called the Bastille. And for centuries, this prison was feared. This is where everyone from, gamblers to thieves to even murderers would go. But even people who their basically breaking of the law was they could not pay their debts. They could not pay their bills. So everyone feared the Bastille. Now, people at this point were very, very violent, were starting to get beyond desperate, and they started to attack the homes of the nobles and of the people who had money. They said, we don't have the food. We know the rich guy living in the nice house has got the food. We're going to go take theirs. And in order to start, taking things that aren't yours, in order to start hardcore stealing, you need weapons. And the best place to find weapons during this time was the prison of the Bastille, because they had the guns, they had the gunpowder, they had the bullets. So the people riot and they seize the Bastille. They actually go and break down the door and kill the guards who were there in a very violent, bloody manner, and take the gunpowder and take the guns. And this was a major start of the French Revolution. Today in France, they celebrate Bastille Day. It's almost like our version of July 4th. They let off fireworks. It's also in July, as a way to celebrate the beginning of the French Revolution. This is also when the French Revolution went from being a war of words to a war of bodies in the streets and of violence and of blood. It turned into a very violent, bloody revolution. Now, while the French Revolution in the streets is getting more and more bloody, the National Assembly has started to create a new government. They have started to really reword how their government is going to run, rework how the powers of the king and the powers of the people. And one of the first things they did was they wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Man, which is a extremely important document in world history. The first thing that the Rights of Man did was it abolishes all the estates and said that all men are equal in France. It doesn't matter who your daddy is. It doesn't matter who your last name, what your last name is. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. You're all considered citizens of France with equal responsibility and equal rights. And this was a huge page turner, because now they had written down what the citizen is going to be. It contained a lot of enlightened ideas, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, things of that nature. Now, a quick little side note about the Declaration of the Rights of Man is that you'll notice it says Rights of Man in the title. It did not include any rights for females, for women. And when a woman, Olivia de Horay, actually rewrote the Declaration of the Rights of Man to state Declaration of the Rights of Man and Women, she was punished. They actually put her in the guillotine and chopped off her head because they felt that she had stepped too far, that this was about men's rights. It did not include any women or female rights. So these Enlightenment ideas had a large effect on the people of France, but they were not about to let those rights and those guaranteed rights they were not going to allow them to go to the female. These were just for the guys. Now, the National Assembly finished the new French Constitution in 1791. It defined the role of government and basically the purpose of the French government. It was a limited monarchy. They still had their king. He just had a limited role. He could not do things without without the permission of the National Assembly. All right, and they had a representative assembly. They were going to have elections and a lot of things that we have here in America. They kind of copied us in a lot of ways. The most important part of it was it stated that the government must protect people and natural rights. If you remember, natural rights was a term coined by John Locke, and those are rights that are given to you that cannot be touched by the government. Every human being has them, and it is something that cannot change. That's something that the government cannot take away from you. For instance, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the freedom to be who you are. And they also, with this limited monarchy, the government or the state controls the church. They do not allow the church to have as much power as it does and control of the government. Now, once the steps to limiting the power of the king started taking place, things started to get really, really crazy in France. A lot of France's neighbors, its neighboring countries, did not like what was happening in France because they did not want their own people in their countries thinking, well, the French are getting rid of their king, we can get rid of our king too. So you had other European countries starting wars with France to try to make sure King Louis stays in power, that he stays nice and strong. Him and his wife, Marie Antoinette. They don't want them to lose their power. Of course, the people running the country at this point was a small group of mostly lawyers, and they called themselves the Radicals. And in 1792, they took control of the assembly. And this is where things got very bad very quickly. All right, the first thing the radicals did, run by a guy named Maximilien Robespierre, was they killed the king. They said King Louis cannot stay alive. We have to get rid of him. And using the new machine called the guillotine that chops off their head, they end his life and anyone who they feel supports the king. So this starts a period of a lot of people dying for their beliefs, and they're turning into actually people who are worse than King Louis ever was. There is a saying that absolute power corrupts absolutely, meaning that once a leader gets a little bit of power, they like it, and they start becoming just as bad because they want to hang on to that power. No matter who they have to kill, what lies they have to tell, they'll do whatever it is necessary to hang on to that power. And that, unfortunately, starts to affect the radicals. They went into the French Revolution with very lofty hopes of democracy and natural rights and freedoms and liberties. And unfortunately, now that they've started to taste the power behind the movement, they're turning into their own versions of little dictators. So they kill the king, they take control of the assembly, they declare France a republic under their new slogan, liberty, equality, and fraternity. Meaning liberty is freedom, equality, everyone is equal, and fraternity meaning brotherhood. They're all going to work together like brothers help other brothers. This period when Maximilien Robespierre and the other radicals took over France and executed the king was called the Reign of Terror. And you can see here in the slide that we have a painting of Maximilien Robespierre, and then over to the side, right side, you can see a political cartoon representing when they killed the king, and they're actually holding his head up in front of everyone to see. Now, these executions during the Reign of Terror, everybody came to. This is what, was better than a baseball game, better than a basketball game. This is what they would have gone to for entertainment. You actually brought snacks. People would throw things at the people who are up there ready to be, decapitated, ready to lose their head. And everyone went to these executions. Now, during this Reign of Terror, thousands of Frenchmen were executed. Some for not believing in Robespierre enough and his ideas, others because somebody said that they wished the king was brought back. Very stupid little things that took away from people's personal freedom. Robespierre during this time and the radicals together actually said that the Declaration of Rights of Man no longer matter because France was in what we would call a state of emergency. And he actually stripped everybody of their rights, so they had less rights than they did when King Louis was there. So this upset people a lot, and they started to really dislike Robespierre. And eventually, the people in the National Assembly start to realize that Robespierre has gone off the deep end, that he is no longer worried about his people and their rights, that he's more interested in keeping his friends himself. And the National Assembly actually turn against Robespierre. His other radicals turn against him because they're worried that he is actually going to kill them, because he has killed off most of his so-called friends. And so he goes into the National Assembly one day thinking he's going to give this big speech. He's going to list all these people that he is now going to put to death on the guillotine, and the National Assembly turn around and arrest him, and they order him to death, and he is executed, and this finally stops the Reign of Terror. Thousands of Frenchmen have been killed at this point, and it is said that the river that runs through Paris ran red because there were so many dead bodies in the river, and so much blood had been drained into the river because he killed so many people. After the death of Maximilien Robespierre, the government is very weak. They're trying to run France. They're still being attacked by their neighbors in Europe who want to stop the French Revolution. There are other kings and queens who want to come in and take over France. And through all of this chaos, you get the rise of a wonderful military leader named Napoleon Bonaparte, which would end up taking over France, rebuilding it up, honoring some of the rights, and really changing what was going on in Europe and having a lasting effect on the whole country.